It was Friday, August 6th, 2032. 4 days into the war. We are in Lielvārde, a small Latvian city of 6,000 along the Daugava River, 50 kilometers southeast of Riga. Together, my partner and I had documented war zones before. Africa, the Middle East, Ukraine. We believed we were battle-hardened, that we were prepared to cover this new war in Europe. We were wrong. What we did not know was that over the next 4 days, we would not only witness the very worst of mankind, but become ensnared in the conflict itself, finding ourselves the stewards of a terrible truth, trapped and hunted by a modern-day monster. For days, we'd been trying to get to the front lines to document the fighting. But the roads to the east were blocked, first by NATO forces, then, reportedly, by Russian. We learned that the cities of Rezekne and Jekapils have fallen. It turns out that we did not need to drive to the front. The front is coming to us. Many of the civilians we speak to in Lielvārde are certain that NATO will stop the Russians before they reach the city, but many are leaving. Not for the first time, we hear explosions in the distance. We drive to the airbase north of the city to film damage from Russian missile strikes. The NATO forces there are leaving. A Canadian officer, Lieutenant Bill Clendening, gestured at our press markings. "That won't save you here," he told us. He showed me photos from Jekapils of 3 journalists lying dead beside a van clearly marked as press. I don't recognize them. Was it deliberate, I ask. He shrugged. It's not a theory I'd want to test if I were you. His warning is clear. NATO is leaving, and if we were wise, so should we. Matthew and I decide to remain in Lielvārde a while longer, to interview those civilians staying or leaving. We feel it's safe, at least for the moment, and we assume there will be sufficient time and warning to leave, when and if the Russians come. As it turns out, we were wrong about everything.
Go inside!
We hide in a basement lit by cell phones, the electricity cut. The enormity of the sound is overwhelming. The shockwave of each impact passes through you, hijacking all your senses. We are told the explosions are not by missile attacks, but artillery fire. It means the Russians are close. Between attacks, we venture outside, ready to make our escape, but we find our van riddled and disabled by shrapnel. More artillery rounds send us scrambling back to our shelter inside an apartment building along the city's main roadway. It's a long, terrible night of constant shelling. In the morning, we climb to the top floor to find a cell signal, to call our fixer in Riga to coordinate a ride. That's when we see the first Russian tanks moving in. We are too late to escape. For most of the day, soldiers, vehicles, and drones stream past. The Russian troops are tense, but the streets are empty, and with no one firing on them, they soon show no interest in Lielvārde, leaving only a scattering of troops and armoured vehicles as checkpoints. The city is still and quiet, the shelling having moved to the new front. The next morning, people begin to filter outside, testing the danger. We follow. There are houses and buildings still burning, some reduced to ash and rubble. We see bodies, those killed in their homes or caught out in the open during the shelling. The stores, restaurants and the liquor store have all been raided, cleared out by Russian troops. Those soldiers who remain almost entirely ignore us. Still able to get a signal, we file our videos and get updates from our home office. It's then that we first hear of a reported massacre of NATO troops in Rezekne, carried out by Russia's 2nd Guards Motor Rifle Division. Reviewing our footage, we see that the division had passed through Lielvārde the prior day. We catch a glimpse of its commander, Colonel Oleg Nagamov, a man who will soon earn the nickname, the Butcher of Latvia. What we do not know is that the Russians' advance has been halted by NATO forces just 6 kilometers up the road near the village of Kegums. With no way forward, Colonel Nagamov is given the task of garrisoning the area, including the city of Lielvārde, until a breakthrough can be accomplished. What may be good news for NATO will soon become a nightmare for the people of Lielvārde. That afternoon, we began to see soldiers and vehicles of the 2nd Guards Motor Rifle Division returning from the front. It is not like before. This time their arrival appears disorganized and aimless, and they begin to commandeer buildings and houses throughout the city. Many civilians, less fearful than they were before, are out in the streets, some shaking fists and yelling at the Russian troops. Then, without warning, the Russians respond. How many are wounded or killed is unknown, but the sporadic fire goes on well into the night, long after the civilians had cleared the streets. Once more, cell phones are rendered useless, plunging us back into the unknown. And for all of us, it's the unknown that is most frightening. In the morning, we leave our refuge and follow a civilian, Arvils, a paramedic, as he makes his way on foot to the city's sports center. Armed with a portable radio, he is in contact with other first responders inside the city, some of whom are treating wounded as best they can at the sports center, as Lielvārde has no hospital. We slip through alleyways, avoiding roads and checkpoints. Suddenly, seeing the Russians firing wildly into the air, we can only assume that the explosion was a NATO airstrike. Later, we learn that a precision missile had destroyed a Russian command post, killing several officers. Colonel Nagamov missed being among them by just a few dozen meters. We do not reach the sports center. Over his radio, Arvils is told that the Russians have entered the facility. They say they are taking people away. Then we hear gunfire. "They're shooting at us," a man yells. More shooting, then nothing. A few blocks away, we try to see what is happening. At the sports center, there are prisoners being led into trucks. We spot 5 bodies, recently killed, their blood still pooling. We hear sporadic gunfire coming from inside. Then we see Colonel Nagamov. We are too far away to hear, but he is giving orders, and with each, his officers hurry off. There is more gunfire from inside. Then, after an hour, the Russians leave. At dusk, we make our way there. Inside, we find a horror show. There are 22 dead, all civilians. When and how they died is uncertain, but in one cramped storage room, we find 12, all of them with gunshot wounds to the head. Arvils recognizes 2 of them as fellow paramedics. We film it all. In an abandoned home, with our footage yet no cell signal, Matthew and I make the decision that it is time to flee Lielvārde, to show the world what we have seen. How that will be possible, we don't know. I think of the Canadian officer who warned me that our press pass was not bulletproof. Later, Arvils receives word that friendly forces on the opposite side of the river have been ferrying men and supplies at night near a narrow stretch south of the city. Arvils does not have direct contact with them, but he does have contact with others who do. We get little sleep that night, waiting for word, moving from location to location, in fear that even the shortest use of the radio will give away our location. There are rumors that the Russians are going from house to house, gathering all boys and men, ages 12 to 60. Where they are being taken, or their fate, is unknown. By morning, we are told that if a boat comes, we may get a ride, though no guarantees are given. We are also told that Colonel Nagamov has become aware of our presence and has ordered that we be found and killed on sight. Guarantee or not, we'll try for the boat. It's a 7-kilometer trek to the planned boat crossing. We are forced to move in daylight, sprinting from house to house, woods to woods, hiding from patrols, and most worrying, the drones overhead. Their insect-like buzz is almost constant. Along the Daugava River, we find a civilian dumping ground, the soldiers having only half completed their task of rolling the dead into the river. We film it and move on. By nightfall, we reach a narrow spot in the river, a nature preserve with marshlands, giving concealment to those crossing by boat, if a boat is coming at all. Hours later, we hear a motor. Arvils clicks his radio. A click is returned. Friendly forces are coming. Suddenly, we hear a vehicle stop on the road. There are flashlights and shouting. The voices are Russian. Somehow, they have found us. In the darkness, I spot 2 boats.
We gotta move.
The rest is a blur of light and sound and pain. I awake in a hospital in Riga, rescued, treated, and taken there by members of the Italian Special Forces, the Gruppo Operativo Incursori. In my haze, I am told they will save my leg. I am told that my partner, Matthew Tomford, a husband and father to 3, and friend to me for over 2 decades, is dead. The fate of Arvils Lugina is unknown. He was last seen running into the dark, back toward Lielvārde. The footage Matthew and I captured, the war crimes committed, is now out into the world. But the battle continues. The crimes continue. The war has only just begun.
In the next episode, in the Season 1 finale, NATO's eye turns to the Bucha of Latvia as the war takes a new and far more dangerous turn. If you enjoy this series, please send me a YouTube thanks, or join my Flat Circle History Patreon site, where you'll get behind-the-scenes access, member-only content, or even have a character named after you. Plus, it will help out John, the one-man show who makes this all possible. And, as always, please like, subscribe, and share this video. And thanks for watching.